Welcome to the Title IV Part A, Subpart 1, Student Support and Academic Enrichment Program Monitoring Validation Training. The program validation training will only request documentation for that specific requirement in the previous year. However, a district must ensure it has documentation on file for all Title IV Part A program requirements. This section will provide a brief overview of the Title IV Part A program purpose and the indicator that will be validated. In this presentation, I will discuss the description of Title IV Part A programs and activities. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas ESCs, LEAs, and participating private schools, and reflects the Texas Education Agency's current understanding of statute and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and entities are, therefore, advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. Documenting overall compliance for a program requirement may require several forms of documentation to be maintained locally and available upon request by TEA and/or an auditor. Also remember, to ensure overall compliance with program requirements, LEAs should refer to the program guide and/or other program-related resources that reference the multiple forms of documentation required to be maintained locally. The documentation requested for submission during the random validation process may not include all forms of documentation that are required to be maintained locally. I want to share a reminder regarding the Title IV Part A program's intent and purpose. First, this program is designed to provide all students with access to a well-rounded education. Second, to improve school conditions for a safe and healthy student learning environment. And third, improve technology for the enhancement of academic outcomes and digital literacy of all students. The random validation items are aligned with the Title IV Part A program intent and purpose. There is an alignment between the LEA program monitoring validation items and the ESA statute. As you can see on this slide, it starts with the ESA federal statute requirements and program-specific provisions and assurances, followed up by TEA randomly selecting LEAs to provide documentation for the program monitoring validation item. Also, the LEA must complete the ESA Consolidated Compliance Report and complete the Program Compliance Self-Check item. Please note that documentation for virtual meetings is an acceptable form of documentation. Participant rosters that include the meeting title, meeting date, and names and roles will be acceptable substitutes for the more traditional sign-in sheets. This eliminates the need of a participant's written signature. The ESA Title IV Part A Section 4106 provides the statutory requirement that relates to the description of Title IV Part A programs and activities. And it states that each application submitted by an LEA shall include a description of the activities and programming that the LEA or consortium of agencies will carry out, including a description of any partnership with an institute of higher education, business, nonprofit organization, community-based organization, or other public or private entity with a demonstrated record of success in implementing activities. If applicable, the description should also include how funds will be used for activities related to supporting well-rounded education, supporting safe and healthy students, and how funds will be used for activities related to supporting the effective use of technologies in schools. The LEA will provide a description of programs and activities funded to support the program objectives and intended outcomes related to the 3 content areas of Title IV, which are the well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and the effective use of technology. The assurances are aligned with the consolidated application. Documenting overall compliance for a program requirement may require several forms of documentation to be maintained locally and available upon request by TEA and/or an auditor. To ensure overall compliance with program requirements, LEA should refer to the program guide and/or other program-related resources that reference the multiple forms of documentation required to be maintained locally. The documentation requested for submission during the random validation process may not include all forms of documentation required. On the LEA compliance report, one of the program compliance self-check items state the LEA has a description of programs and activities funded with Title IV Part A to support the program objectives and intended outcomes related to a well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and the effective use of technology. Once again, you can see how all of the different TEA reports are aligned to support this random validation item. Title IV Part A, documentation required for the description of programs and activities. The district must submit relevant pages of official auditable documentation for the past school year, providing the detailed descriptions on programs and activities funded to support the Title IV Part A program objectives and intended outcomes related to one content area. The LEA may decide which content area they would like to submit documentation for. The acceptable documentation could be relevant pages of the past year's district improvement plan or other official auditable documentation, providing a detailed description on how those Title IV Part A funds were used for activities supporting one of the content areas. And as I stated earlier, it is the LEA's decision to decide which area they would like to submit documentation for, whether it be well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, or the effective use of technology. The description of the Title IV Part A programs and activities should include detailed information on how the activities funded support the program objectives and intended outcomes related to the one content area in which the LEA is submitting documentation to support. Issues that may result in an improvement needed status could be auditable documentation requested for the past year was not submitted, documentation submitted did not provide a detailed description on how the Title IV Part A funds were used to support programs and activities in the past year. Documentation submitted did not align to the requested description of programs and activities in the past school year, and documentation from another year was submitted instead of the past year. It's very important that the LEA takes note of what the requirements are for each program monitoring validation. Now I will share a few of the program monitoring validations process resources that are available through LEA staff should review the most current program monitoring validations process handbook. It includes introduction, general information, a timeline of the program monitoring validation process from the point of LEAs being notified of selection through the TEA final results being shared with LEAs. In addition, LEAs must follow the instructions for submitting the documentation through the Federal Program Compliance Program Monitoring Validations Work App. The PMV process handbook also provides resources and tools to help LEAs with specific program guidance for selected validation item and a seamless transition through the submission process. This is a snapshot of the relevant pages of the handbook for the LEA's selected program monitoring validations item. LEA should review the handbook for suggested documentation, guidance, and submission instructions. For the validation, the LEA may review the handbook for documentation requested, instructions for assembling documentation, the documentation review process, as well as resources and statute references. LEAs must provide documentation that they provided timely and meaningful consultation with participating private schools through TEA. We have several program monitoring online resources for the overall process, such as the Program Monitoring Validation Process Handbook, instructions for submitting documentation, training video and training slides, navigating the Smartsheet Work App system, guidance documents for each program and requirement, training videos and slides for each of the program requirements. This is where the district can find all program-related tools and resources for the ESA program monitoring validations. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this short video regarding the selected LEA program monitoring validation. Thank you for all you do for students and families that you serve. You do make a difference. Thank you for attending this session. If there are questions following this presentation, feel free to reach out to me, Lenitra Guest, the Title IV Part A Program Director. On the slide, you see my personal email address and my desk number. You may also reach out to the ESSA Support Division email address or call the division phone number. Thank you and have a wonderful day.